Welcome to the President and CEO Focus on the Middle Market podcast series, where President and CEO founder Paul Stukel discusses middle market issues with business leaders from across the nation. Today, Paul speaks with Allen Weh, CEO of middle market leader CSI Aviation, about adapting to opportunities, developing and leveraging competencies for growth, and moving everything from Panda Bears to finance ministers.
So anyway, tell me a little bit about CSI. I mean, it's been around since '72. It's obviously a very interesting company.
Well, it's actually been around 79.
79.
But,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. We've been around 30-plus years now.
Yeah.
I was engaged in some business activities in the late 70s, bouncing around trying to find out what I wanted to do when I grew up, and stumbled onto an opportunity where I was asked to help locate some airplanes, and circumstantially airline deregulation had just occurred, and that was 1979.
Mm-hmm.
And as a consequence of that, I realized that there'd been a major shift, at least in the United States air market. And at the time, and it still is, it's a huge market. But airline deregulation had compelled air carriers who were now free without barrier of entry to enter any market, any city in the United States without having to go to what had been the Civil Aeronautics Board and ask, Mother, may I, and then have to file a tariff and get the tariff approved for the market. Now they could charge whatever they wanted and they could fly wherever they wanted, as it should be. But in order to do that, they stripped the cupboards bare with all their spare airplanes and what had been prior to deregulation, a more structured airline industry that included charter departments and small charter fleets in every airline. They went into the cupboard and took those airplanes and threw them into scheduled service so that they could get a one-upsmanship on their competitors to get into these various markets. So for a period of 2, 3, 4 years after that, there was an absolute paucity of available aircraft for charter in the United States. And what I realized, if one were able to turn over enough rocks, so to speak,
yeah,
and find airplanes cleverly, and then use those airplanes cleverly so that you could have multiple missions once you had an airplane, you could satisfy multiple customers with that resource. And
mm-hmm.
and so we started our company based on that requirement and that model. We found airplanes where people didn't think they existed. We found them from little airplane companies, from little airlines, if you will, from
mm-hmm.
charter airlines. We found them from air travel clubs, and they were more popular in those days than they are now. But the fact of the matter is, we found them, and when we found them, we found people who desperately needed airlift, had been used to just simply picking up the phone and calling an airline, and it was a given that they'd had an airplane. Well, we took advantage of an opportunity in the marketplace, and we built our company. But like any phenomenon of a marketplace, things change. They ultimately will. And sooner or later, the supply fleshed out to meet the demand. And therefore, our uniqueness of finding airplanes under theoretical rocks ceased to be as advantageous as it was in those first few years. But what we did is we acquired skills and knowledge and understanding of other markets. So we grew our company by providing other services to other people for other things. And we now do a multiple series of various service functions. They cover the gamut from not only providing on demand air charter for somebody to fly, as simple as an executive jet to perhaps as large as a wide body moving 300 people. We've done that too. band, for example, to a bowl game. We've moved a band to a bowl game. We've moved Panda Bears for zoos. We've moved Indians out of South America to a location in Hawaii for a movie studio. And
wow.
We have moved equipment that had to be moved in cargo freighters to a place where it was absolutely needed to continue an assembly line. And we've moved people in more sensitive situations. We have emergency response contracts with several companies. We've pulled people out of dangerous situations in Africa. We currently have several federal contracts in which we fly for the Department of Homeland Security, and we move people out of the country, and often we will move people in the country, and frequently they will be in handcuffs.
Yeah, understood.
So we do a variety of things, and we manage fuel. We actually have a couple of fuel contracts now. Based on our acquired knowledge and skills in managing our own fleet of leased aircraft, we have learned how to manage fuel effectively. We hedge our fuel.
Sure.
We handle airfield operations. We handle contract maintenance. We oversee regular routine maintenance of our aircraft. So these are acquired skills. So what we've turned around is we've offered those services to smaller companies and smaller operators that don't have either that knowledge or just want to outsource it.
You know, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
So we just turned around, and as we've learned things, we've sold those services based on our knowledge.
Yeah, I mean it's a very unique, very different kind of approach in that, you know, the mantra is always focus, 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 right? Whereas, I mean, it appears to me that, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that, you know, you, as I think you said, it's sort of, we have now developed a certain amount of competencies, and we continue to do that, and each competency may apply to different verticals, but your key is to make sure that your competencies are, number one, competencies, and number two, continue to grow, and then you find markets for them, as opposed to the other way around. I mean, is that sort of reasonable, or am I getting that wrong?
Well, I think you've said it in a way that is correct. I would simply say that we've broadened our markets by expanding our services, and those services have evolved out of our operational experience. Right.
Interesting. Now, so in terms of and obviously I don't want you to get into specifics because you're a private company, but what is your sort of major service? Because I mean, you know, in looking at your company, as you said, there's a whole bunch of them. You know, private, evacuation, entertainment, campaign. You know, there's a whole bunch of services you provide, and of course, in each one of those services, there are other services such as catering and all that kind of stuff. You know, what's sort of your bread and butter, or do you have a bread and butter?
Yeah, we do. If it's difficult, we do it. If it's really difficult, we do it well, and that's where we separate ourselves from people who would like to be our competitors. They can't. Anybody can charter an airplane between Dallas and Houston. Anybody can do the simple. Mm-hmm. But come to us with a complex operation that involves a lot of moving parts, we'll figure out how to do it, and we'll do it well.
Now, in terms of that, you know, there's obviously in the charter industry, there's certainly the physical, you know, equipment. You need the planes, obviously. When I thought about this, because we've talked to a various number of charter companies, because that's obviously a more prevalent thing than it used to be.
Sure.
But to me, the question's always been crew. It's always been more people than it's been equipment. I mean, how do you manage that? Because having your kind of service, I mean, my goodness, you've got to have crew available, and obviously they have requirements about sleep, and they can't fly too much and all. So that's a very complex nut to crack, it would seem to me.
Well, let's go back to one point I made, and perhaps I didn't make it clear enough. We're not a charter company per se.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of charter companies. They do charters. That's all they do is charters. We do aviation logistics.
Okay.
We do aviation logistics, and charter operations within the context of that may be one or more of the things required. But in many cases, the end user wants aircraft to fly their missions, and they want maintenance with it. They may want security with it. They may want medical personnel with it. And we will build a contract team that will provide those services, and we'll manage it. So that's different than being NetJets and picking up the phone and saying, "Fly me in I want to go to a golf course down in South Carolina." Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I guess there's two ways to analogize this. One is you're a general contractor that uses subs to finish the deal, or
to bring all the necessary parts together. In fact,
exactly.
I'll use a military analogy. The Marine Corps, which I served with for 38 years, is absolutely good at expeditionary warfare and expeditions, and we put together what's called Marine Air Ground Task Forces, and they're often special Marine Air Ground Task Forces. MAGTAFs are the in-service acronym that's always used because there's too many words to pronounce and too many syllables.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is that we very simply look at a operational mission, and we bring together the necessary components that are going to be necessary to accomplish that mission. So in this mission, maybe we need more helicopters and less artillery. Maybe we need more Amtraks and less trucks. But the point is that we task organize the group, the unit, and build a unit with the parts we want. So it's organized specifically by taking parts from other units, regular standing units, and then we build our own special unit.
Right.
When we're doing a contract, there's a good similarity to that. Somebody comes to us and they say, we've got to have reconfigured airplanes, long range. We've got to fly tactical teams and have the ability to have radios on board and all that kind of stuff. Well, we put our thinking hats on and we turn around and build from the blueprint. How are we going to satisfy this mission requirement? And where are we going to go get the airplanes to satisfy the mission? We'll do that. There's other less serious work, although everything's serious if you're a customer and you expect it doesn't matter whether you're in the business of national security or the business of banking, and I'll give you a great bank example. We were hired by a major bank in New York. I think it was Citibank. It goes back about 15, 20 years, and you may be familiar with the Bretton Woods Agreement that established our monetary policy in the United States. And the Bretton Woods Agreement was back in the 1930s, as I recall, agreed up in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. There's an old resort up there, and that's where all these ministers of finance congregated back that year, and they worked out an agreement for an international monetary policy. Well, on the anniversary of that, 50th anniversary of that, we were asked to facilitate the movement of people. This bank had invited all the ministers of finance of those participating countries to come memorialize and commemorate the anniversary of the Bretton Woods Agreement. So you had all these high-powered secretaries of the Treasury and their equivalents in European countries, their ministers of finance and that stuff, and their entourages coming to the United States to be moved to Bretton Woods. Well, our job was to get them to Bretton Woods. Well, Bretton Woods doesn't have an airport. So this was one of those things where you think out of the box. We had international arrivals coming in to JFK. We needed to move people up to New Hampshire. So we put together a shuttle service into Lebanon and into Lebanon, New Hampshire, using, at that time, this is 20 years ago, this 727 aircraft, which there were a lot of them flying. Now you don't see very many of them left. But at the time, it was a 727. and we flew a shuttle service so that on demand, as arranged, that airplane would be available to move the people up to Lebanon when they deplaned off their international arrival. Then we positioned a helicopter in Lebanon, and we flew the people who got off the 727. They got into a helicopter, and we flew them up, and we established a landing zone in the Bretton Woods Resort lawn. And that's how they got there. And the few exceptions were those who didn't want to fly in a helicopter, and we had a bus arrangement to bus them up.
Right.
So it was one of these things with a lot of moving parts, a lot of VIPs, and if we pulled it off, no one would ever think that it was but a routine operation. Well, we pulled it off, and nobody ever gave any thought. It was just a routine operation. They took it for granted.
Sure. Wow, that's interesting. Well, I mean, so it strikes me that your business is it faces constant, well, as you said, putting your thinking cap on, constant sort of challenges, logistical challenges that are presented by your clients that are, I would assume, pretty unique.
Absolutely.
At a certain time. So, how do you deal with that? I mean, from a management perspective, obviously you've been very successful. That strikes me as being a tough environment to work in. Well, or at least to make happen.
Well, I say that about everybody's business.
Sure.
Occasionally I ask another businessman, totally different field, how's things? How's business? It's good, but I got this problem, and I think, man, I wouldn't want to be in that business. Or how about the restaurant business? Everybody loves to go out to eat, and everybody has this fantasy, I want to own this restaurant one day. Well, that's not something I want to do. I love to go out to eat like anybody else, but I don't want to own a restaurant because that's one of the toughest businesses in the world. But everybody who's successful in an endeavor has figured out how to manage the brown spots in their pasture, avoid the potholes and the landmines. You've learned how to do it. Some of it's instinct, some of it is analytical, but the fact is you've learned how to do it. We've learned how to deal with the landmines and the potholes in our pasture. And so with that a given, not that we don't have to deal with serious ones from time to time. Great one we lost an aircraft engine in Tegucigalpa. We were flying in there on a mission. That's down in Honduras, the capital of Honduras. So we flew a replacement engine in, and when the aircraft arrived and it was a cargo aircraft with an engine on board, the government wanted to charge us an import fee, an import tax on our replacement engine. So we had to go to the U.S. Embassy. It cost us 3 more days while the U.S. Embassy negotiated on our behalf to convince them that this was not, in fact, an import for use in the country, that it was, in fact, a replacement for a part on an airplane, albeit a big engine. But those are potholes in the road because you've got a cost that suddenly you didn't anticipate, and the meter starts running. You're chartering an airplane to fly an engine. You're leasing an engine. And, oh, by the way, the broken airplane had to be replaced. So while the broken airplane's on the ground, you're leasing another airplane.
Right.
So, these things are big-ticket items. You learn to deal with them. Point being is that we understand how to deal with this stuff, and we've learned to live with it. So when a complex operation comes in, we just peel it down. How do we get it done? And I absolutely can't stand the word can't. So the verboten word around here in dealing with any kind of a sales call is I can't. You can hear that any day. You pick up the phone and you'll talk to some government bureaucrat, or you can talk to some corporate bureaucrat, and they'll tell you I can't. There's a rule. Every company, every organization ought to follow. Nobody should be allowed to say no that doesn't have the authority to say yes.
That is a great rule. That is a great rule. And you
and I both know you can walk into just a hardware store, if you will, and some clerk will say, I can't do that, or no, we don't do that. Well, that's an attitude problem. And it's a management problem who hasn't fixed the attitude on the front lines.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have that attitude problem here. We welcome tough phone calls.
Yeah, that's great. So where do you go? Where do you go from here? I mean, you've been growing for quite a long time here.
Yeah.
I mean,
we keep growing.
Well, it sounds like it. I mean, what are the growth opportunities for you now? I mean, considering all the stuff you do.
Well, we thought, hey, we're making money, the lights are on, people call us, we've got a pretty good reputation out there. Airlines refer people to us. When the duty charter department in an airline, someone will call and say, hey, we can't do that. But there's a company over in New Mexico that specializes in it. Why don't you call them? We get these kind of calls all the time, and that's a good problem to have. But we decided to re-examine ourselves, and we solicited proposals. We wanted specifically a good market research company to come in and get inside us, understand what we've done, what we do, what we can do, and then look at what's out there, since they were a market research company, that how we could apply our services to those markets. And this was a 3-month process. So we went through that, and our eyes were opened as to the opportunities and the synergies that we hadn't seen before. So consequently, we decided, okay, they made certain recommendations of us. We think it'd be important for you to, and I call this retweaking, not necessarily rebranding, although a little bit of rebranding, I guess. Our company, CSI Aviation Services, well, very shortly it's going to be CSI Aviation, and we're dropping the services. Not enough that people are ever going to notice, but it's a cleaning up. Our letterhead's going to change a little bit. Our corporate logo type's going to change. Company colors are staying the same, so it's not going to be dramatic, but it's going to be enough of a change. More important than the cosmetic stuff on marketing materials will be a more defined look at our services, so that we can approach these new market opportunities, and it becomes clear that what we do is applicable to what they need. And that process is underway as we speak. We went to the second phase, where we retained a ad agency that did these sort of things. And then third phase will actually, which we rarely do in this business because of the nature of it, but we will do some very targeted display advertising and online advertising to certain in certain publications, certain mediums, and we're exposed to also a very sophisticated capability these days, which never ceases to amaze me. But the fact of the matter is that you can now, through online inquiries, trace back and find people who are poking around your website. It's amazing. And so we're going to add that capability. So once we're up with our new website and people are looking at us, and people have and we get some repeat interest, we're going to be able to identify who they are, and if we have to go back out to them because they haven't called us, we'll do these sort of things. So we're ramping up to take advantage of the fact we live in 2013, and we're going to have all the whiz bang,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Tricks and tools of the trade, and off we go to the next level.
No, that's great. Well, Allen, I swear to everybody that I try to hold these things to 30 minutes, because I know everyone's like incredibly busy, and so I guess nothing else for me to say. But I really, really appreciate your taking the time to talk to me. This has been fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
I appreciate your taking time to talk to us. We're sometimes, when you're out in when we started business, I'll leave you with one little humorous anecdote. When we first started this business, the internet didn't exist.
Yep.
So it was just the usual stuff you had to do. Telephones. You didn't have cell phones either. There were a few, by the early 80s, there were these huge things that you'd hold in your hand that were the size of a loaf of bread with a little antenna coming out of them. That was the first, kind of cell phone equivalent. So early part of our, and I don't know if you ever remember going to a conference where at the breaks you'd go out and there'd be a message board, and people would call in to us, and you'd look for your name, like so-and-so's calling, you return their call, and you'd go over to a payphone and call somebody back. Yeah. So
payphones, do those still exist, actually?
Oh, occasionally, I guess.
Occasionally I see one, yeah.
That's the business environment we're operating in, and building relationships, and in that environment, given what now looks so antiquated, the method we communicate, people would say to you, New Mexico, how do you do this business from New Mexico? By the way, where is New Mexico? I said, it's halfway between Arizona and Texas, and it's okay. We got telephones, and by the way, it's New Mexico, not Old Mexico, so we're part of the union. You'd have a lot of fun with that, but
unlike Texas, right?
Yeah. Nowadays, people don't even ask. I mean, you know, there are so many people doing business in so many interesting places, and now, given communication and technology, no one even thinks about that. But I promise you, 30 years ago, people would say, "How can you do business in New Mexico? Shouldn't you be in New York?" I mean, you get all kinds of crazy questions.
Right. Hey, we got running water here in New Mexico. Relax.
Yeah, that's right.
The indoor plumbing came here a long time ago. Yeah, that's great. Well, Alan, again, I appreciate it very, very much.
Be sure to check back for future editions of the President and CEO Focus on the Middle Market podcast series. Thanks for listening.